Think of like the absolute best teacher in your building. Maybe it's that veteran colleague who can just command a totally chaotic room with nothing but a raised eyebrow.
Yeah. Or the staff room favorite, right? The one whose students would just gladly run through a brick wall for them.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
mean, we revere these professionals. We treat their methods like magic. But what if the very thing that makes them a legend in the hallways is actually the exact mechanism that is slowly sabotaging their ability to actually teach?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that is a deeply uncomfortable premise for anyone who has spent years or even decades refining their classroom persona.
Oh, for sure.
It just really challenges that fundamental narrative we build around professional success.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this because our mission for today's deep dives is really dedicated to the professionals tuning in who think they have their classroom identity totally dialed in.
Which is a lot of people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're digging into this fascinating piece of writing called The Calibrated Teacher, and it draws heavily on the work of Anthony Gracia.
With the psychologist.
Yeah, from the mid-90s.
Yeah.
He basically mapped out how educators orient themselves toward their students and their content. And look, we're not here to validate your favorite teaching style. We're actually here to figure out how a teacher's greatest strength quietly becomes like a fatal flaw.
And to do that, I think we have to establish the baseline of Gracia's research. Because when he observed classrooms and categorized these orientations, things like the formal authority, the expert, the facilitator, he wasn't diagnosing personality type.
Okay, so it's not a personality test.
No, not at all. And he wasn't sorting teachers into like moral categories where one approach is inherently more righteous than another, you know.
Right.
He was simply documenting the behavioral tools that teachers use to survive and just navigate the complexities of a classroom.
I like that framing.
Yeah.
It's like a tool. You know, it's like a favorite kitchen gadget. It's great for its intended purpose, but you wouldn't use a blender to chop wood.
Exactly.
Oh.
Or a hammer to drive a screw.
Yes. So if we imagine two colleagues sitting in the staff room, just talk about how their teaching has changed over the years, the conversation shouldn't be about finding the quote-unquote correct identity.
Right.
It's about recognizing how the tools we rely on evolve.
Yeah.
So let's trace that evolution. Let's start right at the beginning of a career, year 1, year 2.
Oh, boy. Pure survival mode.
Exactly.
Huh.
The cognitive load of making like 1,000 micro decisions a day is just crushing.
Yeah.
So what do most of us reach for?
Structure. We reach for structure.
Yeah, which Gracia calls the formal authority style.
Right. And the formal authority operates on predictability. I mean, expectations are explicitly clear, routines are rigid, and the follow-through on consequences is just relentless.
The boundaries are crystal clear.
Exactly. Students know exactly where the boundaries are.
But I have to play devil's advocate here for a second. Because if I'm a principal walking the halls of a school with 2,000 kids, and I see a teacher running a tight, highly organized ship, I consider that a massive win.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, the trains are running on time. I honestly don't see the trap in that.
Well, in year 2, it is a win. A well-managed classroom is a total prerequisite for learning. The trap of the formal authority doesn't spring in those first few years.
Okay, so when does it happen?
It creeps in over a decade. So fast forward to year 12. The teacher is still running the exact same behavioral matrix, but a psychological shift has occurred.
Huh. What kind of shift?
Well, the rigid systems that were originally designed to create a safe space for human connection, they've slowly and quietly replaced the human connection.
Oh, wow. Wait, is that just a byproduct of burnout? Like the emotional labor of getting to know 150 new teenagers every single year just becomes too exhausting.
Yes, exactly.
So the teacher just uses the rules as a shield.
Cognitive fatigue plays a massive role there, yeah. Because it's far more efficient to manage a system than to manage relationships. The rules handle the friction.
That makes sense. But it sounds lonely.
It is. The cost is profound isolation. The teacher basically becomes a highly efficient administrator of compliance rather than an educator.
That's a brutal way to put it.
But it's true. And the source provides this phenomenal litmus test for this specific trap. It asks, can you list 5 things about each of your students that do not appear on your roster?
Oh, man.
Right. Not their attendance, not their grades, but their actual lives.
Wow. That's like leaving your house on autopilot. You know, the system works, you get to work, but you weren't actually present for the drive at all.
Yes, a perfect analogy.
And if you can't list those 5 things, it's because the hum of your perfect predictable system is just so loud that it completely drowns out the silence of you not actually knowing who is sitting in front of you.
Exactly.
And because that uncertainty is quiet, it's just incredibly easy to ignore.
It creates a totally false sense of security. I mean, the room is quiet, so the teacher naturally assumes learning is happening. But, as we know, compliance is not comprehension.
So true. Okay, let's follow this career timeline forward then. Let's say a teacher survives those early years. They get tenure, right?
Right.
They aren't just managing the room anymore. They are deeply immersed in their subject matter. They just love the content.
Yes, the content experts.
Which brings us to what Grasha categorized as the expert and the personal model. Let's start with the expert style.
So these two orientations really dominate at the secondary and collegiate levels. The expert provides stability through just undeniable content mastery.
Okay. And the personal model.
The personal model takes it a step further by actually demonstrating the cognitive process. They narrate their problem solving in real time to show students how a master thinks.
Which, I've got to say, I always viewed the personal model as kind of the gold standard of instruction.
A lot of people do.
Right. You are making the invisible cognitive process visible. You say, watch how my brain attacks this DDQ, or look at how I break down this quadratic equation. It demystifies the learning entirely.
That's the goal, yeah.
So how does mastering your craft and demonstrating it actually backfire?
Well, what's fascinating here is the hidden assumption embedded in that approach. Like you said, the intention is to demystify, but psychologically, the assumption is that the teacher's neurological pathway is a universal map for the room.
Yeah.
The teacher subconsciously thinks, if it makes sense to my brain and I show you my brain, it will automatically make sense to yours.
Oh, I see the gap there. It's like watching an Olympic gymnast explain a backflip by just doing a flawless backflip in front of you and saying, see? Just do it like that.
Yes, perfect example.
It doesn't actually illuminate the mechanics for someone who has never done it. It just makes the distance between the novice and the expert blindingly obvious.
And that gap is driven by what psychologists call the curse of knowledge. The teacher has been fluent in the subject for so long that they literally cannot reconstruct the mental state of a novice.
Wow. They've forgotten what it feels like to struggle with it.
Exactly. They don't remember what it feels like to not understand. So when the personal model fails to translate, the teacher unconsciously shifts right into the expert trap.
Wait, so being too good at your subject and showing it can backfire into this expert trap. What does that actually look like in action?
Well, it looks like an allergy to cognitive friction. The teacher poses a complex question to the room, right? And the room is silent as the students try to process it.
Which is normal?
Right. But to the expert, that silence feels agonizing. Or worse, feels like a waste of instructional minutes. So the teacher just answers their own question. They finish the student's sentences because they know exactly where the thought is going.
Oh, man. Our source has a devastating phrase for this dynamic. It says that the students in that classroom end up watching competence rather than actually developing it.
Yes. Watching competence.
The teacher's putting on this masterful performance of knowing the material, but because they sweep away all the struggle, they leave absolutely nothing for the students to wrestle with.
Nothing at all.
It's like the teacher's brilliance becomes the ceiling for the student's growth.
Which naturally triggers a massive pendulum swing in the broader culture of education, right? Teachers start to realize that lecturing isn't working. They realize they are doing all the cognitive heavy lifting, so they swing wildly in the opposite direction.
Ah, yes. Here is where we hit the modernists. The teacher decides, okay, I am talking way too much. I need to step back and let the students drive.
Yes, the classic shift.
And Grasha categorized this orientation as the facilitator, or in its more extreme form, the delegator. Inquiry drives the room, the students own the work, and the teacher is just the guide on the side.
And look, when it works, the energy in a facilitator's room is electric. The learning feels authentic, it feels deeply internalized.
There's a trap.
There is always a trap. And the philosophical trap that develops here is arguably the most insidious of all because it masks itself as ideological purity.
Wait, ideological purity, are you saying that stepping back becomes less about student learning and more about the teacher feeling morally right about their pedagogy?
That is exactly the mechanism. Over time, the act of stepping back begins to feel inherently virtuous to the teacher.
Interesting.
Consequently, the act of stepping in, intervening, providing direct instruction, correcting a misconception, it starts to register internally as a failure of the model.
So the teacher looks out at a room full of kids, talking, moving around, actively engaged in some group project, and they treat that sheer volume of activity as undeniable evidence of success.
Exactly. They mistake the buzz of the room for actual academic achievement.
Wow. They just assume learning is happening because it looks busy.
Right. They essentially abdicate their responsibility to guarantee the learning. I mean,
Right.
a group of students can be highly engaged, collaborating beautifully, and be entirely wrong about the concept they are supposedly mastering.
That is a terrifying
It
thing.
really is. But the facilitator is so committed to the process of student-led discovery that they just ignore the poor outcome.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because Gracia named all these formal styles, right? The authority, the expert, the facilitator. But our source insists we talk about an unofficial style that wasn't in his original matrix at all.
Oh, yes, the one we all know.
Yes. Every single staff room has this person. The author calls them the connector.
The staff room favorite.
Exactly. This is the teacher whose entire practice runs on relationship. The kids feel seen, they feel safe, and they will tell this teacher the truth about their lives in ways they won't with anyone else in the building.
And we have to acknowledge that the psychological safety the connector provides is incredibly vital.
Oh, totally.
For some students, having one safe adult in the building is literally the only reason they haven't dropped out. Trust is an absolute, non-negotiable prerequisite for learning.
Right. So if trust is the foundation, how does being the universally loved teacher become a trap? I mean, kids want to be in my room, right? That's a good thing.
It is a good thing until the trap springs, and it springs when the teacher confuses the prerequisite with the objective.
Oh, well.
Trust is the foundation, yes. But relationship by itself is not instruction. The connector relies on the psychological comfort of being liked to validate their professional identity.
Ouch. That is a brutal truth for the favorite teacher to swallow.
It requires immense self-honesty. I mean, a student might try harder in your class because they like you, sure, but goodwill doesn't magically impart the ability to synthesize complex texts or solve a multivariate equation.
Right. They still need to learn the skills.
Exactly. They love my class is a wonderful metric for school climate, but it is a terrible metric for lasting academic growth. The connector often discovers, usually far too late in the year, that their students feel wonderful but haven't actually learned the required material.
So if we lay all these out, the suffocating rules of the authority, the brilliant performance of the expert, the chaotic buzz of the facilitator, and the warm hug of the connector, every single one has a fatal flaw when it stops being a conscious choice and just becomes an unquestioned default.
Precisely. They become default.
So how do we navigate this? When colleagues are having that honest conversation about a 30-year career, why do some teachers manage to adapt while others just, get stuck playing the same character year after year?
Well, the divergence usually happens mid-career, and it hinges on how a teacher responds to cognitive dissonance.
Cognitive dissonance. How so?
The teachers who struggle are the ones who refuse to let go of the tool that made them successful in year 3, even when it is clearly failing the students sitting in front of them in year 14. They protect their identity at all costs.
Let me guess, they blame the kids.
Always. They blame the kids, they blame the administration, they blame society.
Right. Kids these days just don't respect structure, says the formal authority.
Exactly. Or they don't have the attention span for deep thought, says the expert.
It's an ego defense mechanism. It's so much easier than admitting your tool isn't working.
Go to this.
But if you look at the genuinely effective professionals, the ones who actually continue to evolve, what is the catalyst? Because no one wakes up on a random Tuesday and just decides to dismantle their entire professional identity.
No, they don't. The catalyst is almost always a collision.
A collision.
Yeah, a point where their internal self-image violently stops matching the objective reality of the room. It might be a student they poured their heart into as a connector who still failed the state exam.
Oof.
Or it might be a meticulously crafted expert lesson that the entire class just completely bombs. The turning point is what the teacher does in the 30 seconds after that collision.
Do they protect their ego, or do they choose to look at the evidence?
Exactly. Do you get defensive or do you get curious?
And choosing the evidence brings us to the core philosophy of our source today. The concept that basically separates a stagnant career from an evolving one. The title of the piece itself, The Calibrated Teacher.
Right.
So what does this all actually mean for the teacher who feels totally confident in their current style? What does it mean to be calibrated?
Well, to understand calibration, we really have to separate it from confidence. Our profession praises confidence, but confidence is highly subjective.
Sure, it's a feeling.
Right. A confident teacher feels they are effective because the room feels comfortable and familiar to them.
Like, I'm the fun teacher, everyone's laughing, I feel great, kids want to be in my room.
Precisely. A calibrated teacher, on the other hand, knows they are effective or ineffective because they rely on a constant stream of ongoing objective evidence. They do not rely on the vibe of the room.
Okay, so what does that objective evidence look like in practice? Let's make this concrete. Give me a scenario of an uncalibrated teacher versus a calibrated teacher experiencing the exact same failure.
Okay, let's take a history teacher giving a lesson on analyzing primary sources. First period comes in, the teacher runs their standard instructional model, and the lesson completely falls apart.
Total disaster.
Total disaster. The students are confused, the discussions are shallow, and the exit tickets show zero comprehension.
Okay, so the uncalibrated teacher is going to immediately reach for an environmental excuse to protect their ego, right? Like, well, first period is always sleepy.
Exactly. We had an assembly yesterday, their schedules are off. Or, this is just a low skills group.
They externalize the failure.
They do. And then, and this is crucial, they run the exact same flawed lesson for second period.
Because obviously the lesson was fine, it was the kids who were broken.
Right. But the calibrated teacher experiences that exact same failure, and their internal response is curiosity, not defensiveness.
They don't blame the sleep schedules.
No, they look at those blank exit tickets and they analyze the specific mechanics of their pedagogy. They realize, at minute 14, I asked a hinge question about the author's bias, but I didn't provide any scaffolding for the historical context.
Oh, wow. They locate the mechanical breakdown in their own instruction.
Yes. And because they located the specific breakdown, they can adjust the tool. For second period, they add a 3-minute contextual primer before asking the hinge question.
So same lesson, same demographic of students, a totally different outcome.
Yes, because the teacher calibrated to the evidence rather than their feelings, they get a completely successful result.
That is just the power of calibration. It removes the emotion from the evaluation. It treats teaching like a science rather than this mystical art form.
It really does.
And over the span of a career, I imagine the gap between the teacher who externalizes failure and the teacher who calibrates to the data, it just widens into an absolute canyon.
Oh, undoubtedly. And if we connect this to the bigger picture of Anthony Grosh's work, the fundamental insight holds true across every discipline. A teaching style must remain a tool in your belt. It can never become the totality of your identity.
Like we said earlier, you wouldn't use a hammer to drive a screw, no matter how much you love that hammer.
Right.
The most masterful educators absolutely have a dominant style, baseline approach that aligns with their natural personality. But their real superpower is their peripheral vision.
Yeah, their awareness.
They're paying such close attention to the objective data coming back from the room that they instantly recognize when their default tool isn't landing. They don't force the students to fit the tool. They reach for a different tool to fit the students.
They prioritize the reality of the learning over the comfort of their habits.
Which brings this conversation directly back to you listening right now. We started by asking you to think about the best teacher in your building, but the real work is turning that lens inward.
It is.
It is time to have an incredibly honest conversation with yourself. What kind of teacher are you, really? Think about the mix of styles you deployed in your classroom today.
Was it intentional?
Right. Was that approach actively and consciously chosen to serve the specific neurological, academic, and emotional needs of the students sitting in front of you this year? Or are you just running the same behavioral matrix you accumulated a decade ago because it keeps the noise down and makes your day easier?
And look, answering those questions requires a level of vulnerability that is frightening. It requires data that you literally cannot generate purely by reflecting in isolation.
Because your own brain will always protect its ego first.
Always.
And that is the final provocative thought we really want to leave you with today. You cannot inspect the exterior foundation of your own house while you are comfortably sitting on the sofa in the living room.
That's beautifully put.
You need an outside perspective to spot the cracks. You need someone standing in your classroom who is brave enough to look at your instruction and tell you the absolute truth about what is actually happening versus what you think is happening.
And more importantly, you need to be calibrated enough to hear it without getting defensive.
Exactly. So look at your schedule this week. Who is the colleague you respect enough to invite into your room? Who can you ask to hold up that mirror? And ultimately, are you finally ready to look at what it reflects?